Hello and welcome everybody. Today is the day that I can finally start showing you these molds here. I know a lot of you requested that I should explain my molding system. So today I'm gonna show you how these work and what we need to do to prep them and how everything is set up to run these. So follow me along, I'm Würfel, and today we're gonna see the molding system of. So from time to time you need new molds, and that was the general idea to make my molding process more efficient and quicker. For that I invented these, and it's not only these pieces, there's a little bit more needed. So let's put these old ones aside. I got a complete box here. So this is all my molding stuff, all the mold masters. So you can see here's the mold master for my sphere shell case. And here I have in labeled bags the third piece of the molding system and the dice themselves. So let's get this one out here and I can show you how this works. So what I have is a printed and sanded and polished up die. I drilled a hole in it to attach this little metal pin. I want to have a small filling spot so the cleanup is less work. And you can see they are just attached to each other by pulling into each other. So what you would need is some piece of straight wire. I used some welding rods. They are very handy, they are straight, they are cheap, and in this case it's stainless steel, so nothing happens on that part. And you get them in a lot of different diameters, so you can choose thicker ones if you want, and you can clip them down, so no special tools are needed to work with these. And this is the centerpiece. This here is the funnel section. So let's stay to the yellow one. You put these two shells together. You see down below here we have the cavity for the dice, and up here is the funnel section, and this is the funnel piece. So this just clicks in place right on top here, and here all around this, that's the space that needs to be filled up with silicone. We come to this later. I just want to show you how it looks. So this is the view if one of the shelves would be transparent. So you can see there's always the minimum amount of silicone needed. That's about 4, 5, maybe 6 millimeters of a gap here. So that part on top here, it's only for the filling funnel, so it's not very critical, so you can go a little bit thinner with this one. And then we came to the bottom part, and I decided to go for a sphere shape, as the sphere on shrinkage is very even. So I hope there are no distortions in the shrinkage of the material. Even if it's just about 1% of shrinkage, I want to consider that and don't cause any trouble with it. Also, there's this reset area here with all these little key holes in them. This is to generate this flange all around here. This flange is the thing that actually keeps the pieces together, as I also put my cut into this part. So this is the part where it really needs to be held together, and these keys make sure the alignment is correct in that direction. So that's this part here to hold the pieces together, also to have a little bit of flash to set my cut on. So these are pretty tight. Also the hard shell makes it impossible to squeeze your mold together. So if you have a good setup and you see it's very tight here, you can't force this to squish your mold together and deform it. So that's one of the main reasons I want to use this system. I used rubber bands in the past, and if you have one rubber band too much, or you have one that's a little bit too tight, you squeeze your mold and your dice come out and are skewed, and not in a good way skewed, so you can't use them. And this prevents this. So you have a hard shell, you can use as many rubber bands as you want. You see here are several bands around it to hold it together, but nothing more is needed than that. Okay, so that's so far from this piece here. I will now go and prepare the dice, prepare all the pieces needed, and start assembling everything. And here is the actual master for these pieces. I will also make a new mold for this. You can see here, this is the masterpiece. I could have come along with one, but I wasn't sure if it really works to cast only one piece and hope that it is not distorted or anything during the casting process. So what I generally do to copy these, I have a mold of 2 of these, cast them both, and when I remove them from the mold, at this stage the material is slightly formable. It's pretty hard, but still a little bit soft. And at this stage I put both pieces together and wrap some tape around them, just to make sure that this line here is closed. So every one of these is labeled. I stamped some numbers in them. I hope I can show you here. I hope you can see the 3 in there. And the second half here has the 3 as well. So these 2 here match perfectly together, and they will always work together. So I decided to go for 2 of these pieces and 1 of these. So I will make a new mold for these as well to show you how to make more of them. Also, these will not last forever. You can already see here that there's a lot of spilling, and especially here on the yellow one. And it glued the 2 pieces literally together, and I need to break them open. And now this pin is missing and it's stuck in here. Sometimes you can just go over this with a knife, cut it free, and you can still work with these. But in this case, it seems pretty hard, and I decided to make some more of these, some new ones. So that's the opportunity to do this at the moment. So we have this for later. Now we come to the interesting part, the preparation of the dice. What I do with these is I have you hear it's fluid, it's a wax-based mold release, and I cover the whole dice in this solution and coat them with this wax, and then I polish it up, and thereby if I have any small scratches and stuff going on, also the recessed area is pretty rough on my design here, as I don't have the numbers engraved. I have the complete area around them engraved, so it's pretty rough, and the wax seals them pretty good. So we put these together and take out the other dice. You also can see I directly paired the die to the funnel piece, and that has a special reason. This funnel piece here, you can see there's a groove going all around. For example, here's another one. This is D6. It also has a groove, but you can see it's on a different height. So this groove is much higher. I calculated the volumes of the dice and calculated the volume of this, and just set this part here, I need to pour in so much resin that I come to this line, and then I have enough plus a little bit extra to fill the die and have just a small amount of leftover material, because I don't want to waste a lot of stuff here. So I come along pretty well with this, and yeah, I made this for all of my dice, so we can go along. Also a good opportunity to say on this part, I prefer single molds, even if these are pretty bulky with all the stuff going all around, compared to block molds. Because if you have a block mold and let's say your D8 is having trouble having a bubble or anything else, the complete mold is like waste. And I like to pour complete sets if I can, so having a single mold is pretty good if something goes wrong. Even with a pressure pot and vacuum chamber, sometimes things happen, and then you can just throw away that one mold that is wasted and pour this one new, and you have a complete set to run. Okay, now everything is set up. I made a little bit of room, put these aside. We now need our wax-based mold release. It's a brush on stuff, so I took a Q-tip and a little disposable shot glass. So this stuff, you can see here at the top where it's becoming a little bit thicker. It's literally wax soluted in something that evaporates later. I take a little bit of this. Looks like milk, so be careful not to drink this. And then comes the easy part. I just make sure the complete dice are covered. There, you don't have to worry with this stuff to overdo it. There shouldn't be any problems with this, because you need to polish this up later. So I have a special brush that I use for this, and this removes a lot of this stuff, and then I take a piece of glove to polish it up. It also shrinks a lot down, so this looks pretty thick filled. Every detail is covered, and you will see if these are dried, they look a lot different. So we let them dry, I don't know, an hour or maybe two. It's about an hour or so later, and you can see the material dried. It's a very thin layer, and it's a little bit matte and dull, so I take this brush. I already marked it as my wax brush, and with that I remove the excess material. So that was the brushing, which is done. So we come to the polishing part, and for that I like to use these blue towels. and you do these circling motions. And here you can see the sheen is coming to the surface. And then I do this with all surfaces. So I guess another time lapse. And these are polished up. So we're coming to the final assembly now. For the final assembly, we need all our molds here, of course, without any infill. I just check if everything is still matching. I mean, they're not 100% tight, so I need some masking tape to wrap around them. But I just want to make sure there are no huge gaps that I need to fill up. As this material is pretty thin in some sections, it wouldn't make much sense to chuck this down to create new material. I think this is already a pretty material efficient way. I mean, you could of course make something that's even less material, but you need to find a balance between how much material you use and the stability of the mold and its reliability to hold its form. So you could make a mold that's much thinner, but you wouldn't end up with some good results. So I think that's about the minimum you need to make those molds. If you work with syringes or pipettes to fill your molds, you could easily chuck them in half here and don't use the upper part. But I personally like this way of applying my materials to the filling funnel, so I stick to this. Now comes the next trick on these molds. You can see this little notch over here. In the case of the D4, here's another one. Give me a second. Here is the previous mold, and you can see there are two cuts to come down to the D4. And to find this place for cutting them, I made these little notches over here. So what I now need to do is align the two edges that I want to hit. So in this case, this edge and this edge. And now, even without transparent material, I know the orientation of my die inside my mold. So I get my shells, place the dice inside, and what I check now is the height. So maybe I can, in this case it's pretty fixed, it's right about in the middle, but in some cases you can place the die a little bit higher or lower. Just make sure it's around the middle. So this one gets closed, and now we need some of the masking tape and close it up. To prevent any material from leaking, I go along the long side edge here all the way up. Make sure everything is nice and tight. Then I go around the top. This is to prevent any stuff from spilling out when I pour from one mold into the other. You will see when we cast these, if possible, to take a shot of this. The space is very small, so it needs a little bit of time for the material to sink down and set inside the mold cavity. For that, I make a little bit of an extra here on top. I put all the molds side by side, and when I pour in a huge chunk of material inside here, and this little bit of tape prevents it from spilling all over the place. And then I go directly to the next one, and then I do 3 or 4 molds at the same time and moving forth and back between them until they are filled, and I go on to the next ones. Or I put them in a huge ring and then I pour all around. So, and then I do a second bit of tape just to make sure nothing comes apart, as the tape is not sticking very well to the material. I'll put a little bit of pressure on this, and here we are. This is what we now need to do with all the rest. Here on this one, you see there's only one notch, and I will align it to one of the edges. And we are done with these. So we are about to pour these molds. I made a huge bunch of silicone. You see it's not degassed at the moment. The thin stream and the pressure pot will do the job for this. So I fill in a little bit here, go over to that, go over to that, and so on, all the way around. So this is not super perfect, accurate. I would need a lot more of the tape to make it 100% tight, but it's doing its job, holding the material in and give me the opportunity to work in time, as this material has about 20 minutes, and sometimes it was a little bit hectic to get some made, so I started working on maybe 3 of them, filled one of them after the other, and it was just too long to be effective. This one is full. A little bit here, a little bit there, a lot here. And basically that's it. So we keep the rest to pour it into something useful. So the pressure pot can be closed, and here you can see for me it's just a few minutes ago that I took the footage of the pressure pot video. So here you can see closing the opposite sides. So working down here and here, closing it, working on these two, closing it, and I don't close them to the end, and then I switch forth and back. With a camera, all the things are much more difficult to do. And now we can fill it, and we see us in the next morning when we put this stuff out of the pressure pot. And about a week has passed, so these are for sure now fully cured, and we want to demold our molds. So what we need is a knife. In this case I like to use these negatively curved blades. They have a nice small tip, so it's perfect to reach into the silicone. I also added a fresh plate. For this delicate work I want to have nice clean cuts, no ripping, no struggling. If you have a dull knife, you risk to damage your mold masters, as you need to scrape along very often to cut the silicone, and thereby you can scratch your mold masters. So always take a fresh knife or a sharpened knife for this. So my last mold making is a while back. I go the safe way and add a new blade. But let's unwrap these. I also wear some gloves, not because anything here is toxic or so. It's more on a safety side. Maybe you remember the things that can happen. One of these things that can happen is improperly mixed material that is not fully cured. So you open it and everything spills out, and you don't want to come in touch with that. Also, when you touch your mold masters, you don't want to leave any fingerprints on them. So I always decide to go with gloves on this. So first of all, we can clean the outside stuff. So stuff that's dripping out a little bit. We now need to open this part. You don't need to overfill them. I like it because you then have this little flange on top, so if you have some material spilling all around, it hits this little bit of silicone instead of the mold underneath it. So we go in from the side and try to find the top of the funnel piece, and then we cut all around that. And as always, everything working for the camera is much more difficult. Okay, so this is done. What we now need is to open these, and for that we use this spatula. I like the round edge of it. Make sure not to damage anything. You can use your knife to pre-open it a little bit. On some of the parts I have a little notch at the top to get this in much easier, but you need something sturdy to do this. It needs a little bit of force. So you see this already comes apart, and then I like to twist it, and you see it pops right off. You can, if you have trouble getting this off, you can use talcum powder on the inside before the molding, or some mold release. to be sure that this is not sticking so much. So at this point, you can see here there's a little bit of flashing that's coming through this part, and I use my knife to remove it. Comes off in one piece. Now we need to remove the second part, and now this is the only critical part here. We have the final piece in here, we have the die down here, and in between them we have the little metal pin, and you want to make sure you don't break anything of this. One time it happened to me, I wasn't careful enough, and it took a little chip out of my master die, so I go with this much carefully now, and I try to roll it over from two sides just to make sure it's popping. So, and if I have the underside loose, I carefully lift it up to the top, because we have this notch here, and that's how you get to this piece. So now we need to remove the funnel piece. I like to stretch my material in all directions to loosen it from the surface, and then you can push out your funnel piece, and this is the mold. Now we proceed to cutting that open. You can see here, I hope you can see it, there is a little notch, this little mark. That's from the notch that I have in the funnel piece, and this indicates that I want to cut from this side down, and that's what we're doing now. I like to use this, sit that flat on the table, and put a little bit of tension on top here to pry these apart when I cut them. And then I just simply go down and I wiggle the knife a little bit to create some zigzags. You can see here, it's not a super straight surface, it's a little bit bent and bowed, and you want that to key the parts into each other. So then we are coming down to this part here, and I like to bend over the whole section above like this, and as always in front of the camera much more work. And then I take the knife and step by step, and now I do a zigzag in that direction, just a little bit to create a textured surface here. And now we come to a critical point. We come closer to the die. I know this is hard to see for you now, but you will learn it in experience it when you do it yourself. Go slow and steady here, and when you see your die, you can pry it even more open to see where you are. I take this now for a closer inspection up to me, so I can see what kind of dice is in there and where I need to cut further. And I think we can proceed down this way. So this is one of my regular D6, and you see there's not much space to see something, especially here on the camera and my equipment. But from that you cut down to the next vertex, and then you follow along to the next edge. So we go down here. Now I'm at the vertex, and I decide to go up that way. and that is here. So, and you always want to keep a little bit of tension on this, not too much. You don't want to rip it open, but you want to directly pop open when the knife has cut something, and you directly want to see where you are. So, and we follow it down. Now you can see a little bit more, hopefully. Here we have a little bit better vision of it. So first edge here, second edge here, and now we go down to the third edge, so we reach the bottom point. Much easier to rest it on the table instead of holding it free-handed. So just one spot, a little bit more, and then the die came out pretty easily. That's how you proceed on that. And then you just need to put this part back in here. Make sure it's nice and centered. You will see the line where where the closing is. So if your part is not sitting to that line, you know it's not sitting correctly. And then you put these together, and now you can rubber band them, and you are ready to cast your next dice. So that's so far from this project. Our molds are ready to be used now. I want to give some advice at the end. Always make sure you take your time for this. Don't do it in a rush. Don't try to make it in a hurry, so you will end up always with some minor issues, cutting in the wrong place, your die is not sitting like you want it. You also try different ways to hold your materials, to handle them, try different types of knives. So this is not the first blade that I use to cut my molds. I tried holding them with two hands, putting them down. So this is all stuff you need to find the way for you, how you want to handle them. So don't be frustrated if it's not going very well in the first place. Also, the complete process took me now in the footage about 3 hours or so. Doing things in front of the camera is always a bit tricky and uncomfortable, and I try to bring it along so you can see it. So for me, this whole process with preparing the masters, assembling everything, pouring the silicone, removing all my dice, so this takes about 1.5 hours normally. On the footage it took about double that time, because you're talking and doing things at the same time and try to bring it into focus, etc, etc. That are all things. So don't think this is a very rough and long process. For the very last thing here, I will release the files to these models on Thingiverse, and there are already people that took the inspiration from my advanced casting video and made their own versions. So I don't think that this is something to sell anymore, but I will also sell hard copies of this. So if you want one of these, I will sell the complete set, so 2 shells and the funnel piece. What you will need is the little metal rod and of course an appropriate drill to match this in your pieces. So I will make molds for the shell pieces and the funnel pieces, and I will sell them separately. So if you don't want to go the way to print them or let them print, on Shapeways I paid over $100 just for this setup here, and you can go much cheaper by just ordering the cast copies from me. So that's from this point. If you have a printer available, I will release the files on Thingiverse and put the link down in the description so you can print your own versions. So that's from this here. I wish you a wonderful dice making time, and I hope to see you on the next video. Until that, happy dice making.